We live in a new world, a world that is changing faster than we ever thought possible. A world where we can either adapt or get left behind. It's not about the swiftness of the change, but the greatness of it. Social, cultural, political, but perhaps most of all, professional. Businesses are evolving in different ways, and it's opening up countless new doors for commerce. And in this moment of rapid transition, one thing remains constant. For more than a century, we have served as one of the longest and most vibrant American chambers in Asia. Time and again, we have recognized and confirmed our commitment to trade and commerce and the good it does to our members. By bringing leaders together, by being a voice of business, by making the right connections, and by taking action on the things that matter. This is what AmCham was built for. We are here to serve the interests of Filipino and American businesses by being an avenue for valuable knowledge, effective networking, proactive advocacy, and continued affiliation, all of which contribute to the constant development of the economy. This new and shifting world is full of possibilities. But for us, it comes with a great responsibility. We are AmCham, gathering information to share and discuss the things that drive us forward, connecting leaders, governments, and businesses, taking action on commercial, economic, and even global issues, contributing to the growth of the economy that would strengthen the relationship between its members. For commerce, for progress, and most of all, for country. AmCham Philippines.
Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. To ensure a smooth flow of the discussion, we would like to remind our attendees of the webinar guidelines. May we request all to input their questions in the Q&A box found below your screen. Should you wish to ask your questions live, please click on the Raise Hand button, also found below your screen, and our moderator for today will cue you in. Let us keep our chat box friendly and for webinar-related concerns. Please be informed that this webinar is being recorded, and recording is all rights reserved to AmCham Philippines. We will provide the presentation and recording to all attendees after the webinar. As always, we value your feedback and concerns. Please fill out our survey, which should pop on your screen after exiting the webinar. And for more information, you may visit our website or email us at amcham@amchamphilippines.com. Thank you and enjoy the webinar.
All right, good morning everyone and welcome to another AmCham webinar, today on healthy and green manufacturing facilities and in enhancing indoor and environmental quality. So first of all, again, welcome and thank you for coming to another AmCham webinar hosted by the Manufacturing Committee. Of course, as our sponsors, one of our long-term partners, Santos Knight Frank, and one of our newer partners, which we hope you will get to know soon, uHoo. All right, so without further ado, I'll give the mic on over to Mr. Rick Santos, Chairman and CEO of Santos Knight Frank, and of course, a longtime AmCham board member to officially open our meeting today.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you for the very, very kind remarks and introduction. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this morning. Before I proceed, I'd like to thank Eb Henchcliffe, AmCham Executive Director, Dan LaChica, Manufacturing Committee Co-Chair, President of CEPI, Chris E. Lagon, Co-Chair of the Manufacturing Committee and Cargill's Corporate Affairs Director, and Don Feldbaum, AmCham ICT Committee Chair. And also Evelyn Leviste, who's the Head of Technical Service and Engineering at Santos Knight Frank. And we'd like to salute Evelyn and all our women out there, as this is Women's Day, month and year, or century, it sounds like. So congrats to all the women. Thanks for joining us. I'm pleased to hear that we have about 100 attendees joining this webinar. This speaks volumes of the significance, importance, relevance of the subject we're about to embark on. Indoor air quality certainly is not a new topic, but it is a conversation that has gathered steam, especially over the last 12 months due to the pandemic, especially in the industrial sector, which provides close to 8 million jobs to Filipinos. This week, we will approach the anniversary of COVID-19 lockdown in the Philippines. Can you believe it? It's already been about a year. While we're happy to see vaccines gradually being rolled into the country, the truth is that we have to live with the virus for a while and prepare probably for another one. The question now for everyone, how do we keep our employees and facilities healthy? This morning, we'll hear from two resource speakers on how we can keep our facilities safe. First, we have Evelyn Leviste, once again, the Head of Technical Services and Engineering for Santos Knight Frank, who will discuss IAQ in manufacturing facilities, guidelines, and tips to improve air quality. Well, many of you may know Santos Knight Frank as a premier commercial, residential real estate, property management, valuer, advisor. We have one of the fastest growing technical services and engineering teams in the country, who advise and work with manufacturing, production, and industrial companies with regards to HVAC systems, energy management, thermal scanning, and systems integration, etc. I'm pleased to have with us today Dustin Onghanseng, co-founder and CEO of uHoo, whose air quality solution is being used by many companies within and outside the Philippines. We will hear his views on the need and ROI for IAQ solutions to create healthy manufacturing facilities. Many thanks to everyone, AmCham Manufacturing Committee, uHoo, Santos Knight Frank, for the partnership and making this knowledge sharing event possible. We hope you find this discussion informative, and please reach out at the end of the webinar if you have any questions. Thank you so much, everybody, and enjoy the morning.
Thanks so much, Rick. Thanks so much. All right, now moving on, may we hear a few words from one of our manufacturing chairpersons, Mr. Dan LaChica, who will also be reacting to most of our presentations later on. Sir Dan, are you there? I will.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm unmuted, right? Okay. Thank you, Mark, and thank you for that comprehensive opening remarks, welcome remarks, Rick. And as Rick described, we have a full slate for you today. Very interesting. It should take about an hour and maybe 45 minutes. And the webinar topic is healthy and green manufacturing facilities. So we will have Chris to introduce our speakers, whom Rick has mentioned, and I will be reacting, and then there will be a Q&A session. In fact, we've received a few questions already. Thank you for that. And Eb will close with just a wrap up for today's events. So I'd like to acknowledge my my partner in crime, the co-chairman of the Manufacturing Committee, Chris, as well as our sponsors, Santos Knight Frank and uHoo. So with that, let's get going. And without further ado, I'd like to turn over the microphone, so to speak, to Chris Ilagan. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Really, partners in crime, yeah?
Yeah.
No, but thank you, Dan, and of course, thank you, Rick, and Santos Knight Frank for sponsoring this event. It's a very timely topic for us, and it really is my pleasure to introduce our first speaker. Allow me to do so now. Her name is Evelyn Leviste, and she is the head of Santos Knight Frank's Technical Services business line. She has made her mark for over 10 years of service, where she had majorly contributed in technical services, handling operations and maintenance of various residential, commercial, hotel, and manufacturing accounts. Some notable clients she has handled are Ayala Property Management Corporation, the Mandarin Hotel, Ramada Hotel, Universal Robina Corporation, Mondenisin, On Semicon, and United Laboratories or Unilab. A business management major from the Polytechnic University of the Philippines, PUP. She has had a significant 12-year work experience in the BPO industry as a supervisor prior to her current role. So please join me in welcoming our first speaker today, Miss Evelyn Leviste. Good morning, Evelyn, and thanks for joining us.
Hi, good morning, Chris. Thank you. It's a very comprehensive introduction. So thank you for joining us today. As mentioned by Chris, I am the head of the technical services of Santos Knight Frank. Today, allow me to share some information on indoor air quality in manufacturing facilities. But before that, let me show you a glimpse of what Santos Knight Frank is. You may have known that Santos Knight Frank is one of the leading real estate service provider specializing in commercial, investment, residential properties for tenants and landlords. But Santos Knight Frank also offers engineering and technical services for several offices, residential, commercial, and industrial facilities. In engineering and technical services, we provide energy management, maintenance programs for electrical and various mechanical systems. We also offer supply and installation of different HVAC system, air filtration, and air duct cleaning. We also design and provide as-built drawings and some minor civil and plumbing and restoration works, just to name a few of our services. And given the track record of Santos Knight Frank here in the Philippines, you can see it in our slide right now. Now, as an indoor air quality or IAQ, it is commonly associated actually with COVID-19 in pandemic. Let us have short understanding of IAQ. Indoor air quality refers to the air quality within and around the buildings and structures. It is especially relates to the health and personal comfort of the building occupants. It's important to improve the indoor air quality in your business, even if the symptoms are not immediately noticeable, because they can have devastating or fatal long-term consequences. In most modern buildings, we have the heating, ventilation, air conditioning, or HVAC system that we call, which controls and manages the airflow through the space. These systems are charged with properly conditioning the air for occupant comfort and enabling your equipment to function properly. HVAC systems play a critical role in controlling the movement of air and therefore affecting the potential spread of contaminants. Now, as indoor air quality is commonly associated with COVID-19 pandemic, the indoor air pollution is a leading risk factor for premature death. A global health research institute, that is the IHME, they estimate that 1.6 million people died prematurely as a result of an indoor air pollution. This was about 3% of global deaths. Even the World Health Organization, who puts this figure at 4.3 million or 6% deaths. Right now, what are the impacts of the COVID-19 here in our manufacturing facilities? Even the small and the larger group of business all across the globe affected by COVID-19. The food and beverage manufacturing sector have an anticipated impact in their operations. There will be a strict compliance on health protocols, strategizing to limit the workspace, and there are also problems in the transportation unavailability. Factories and other facilities who are working with wood, metal, machinery, automotive, and other businesses are badly affected and experience scarcity of raw materials. The additional cost to prevention and control measures, such as the testing, the disinfection facilities, even the hand sanitizers and PPEs, these are all mandated right now by DOLE to be provided at employer's expense. Let us move on to the causes of the indoor air problems. Top on the list are the pollutants. Pollutant concentrations can remain in the air for a long period of time. These are the common indoor air pollutants, which can be airborne particles from dust, from smoke, from the building materials and furnitures. It can also be a pollutant from the odors or gases coming from, such as painting. There are also activities on the pollutant coming from the outer air and the carbon dioxide coming from the people exhaling. Next is ventilation. Another main contributor to poor indoor air is a poorly designed, maintained, and operated ventilation system. Ventilation system not only help heat and cool the air, but it also pull in and circulate the outside air. Last is the outdoor air. The air drawn in from outside may also be a potential source of pollution, depending on where the building is located. Nearly construction sites, the emergency generators, the dumpsters, industrial stocks, and even power plants are all likely to produce contaminants that will affect the indoor air quality of your building in a negative way. So what are we going to do to have a good IAQ? Below are some items to consider. First, clean, inspect, and replace the filters. Air filtration is at the top of the list when it comes to limiting the spread of contaminants. Filters should be replaced and cleaned as per manufacturer's recommendations to remove the potential contaminants and blockage that may occur over time. Second, increase the fresh air volume. Ventilating your facilities with as much outdoor air as you can is essential to controlling the spread of viruses and diluting the airborne contaminants. Next, manage the temperature and humidity. Temperature and humidity are closely linked in terms of occupant comfort. Dry, cool air may create the highest risk conditions for airborne transfer of COVID-19 in the buildings. As the research suggests that maintaining an indoor humidity should be between 40 to 60% humidity indoors, as this is the ideal humidity percentage, just to limit the airborne spread of COVID-19. Then, conduct the regular building health checks to ensure your HVAC system is functioning properly. In addition, through your inspections, ensure your exhaust fans and ducts are operational and not blocked, especially in high-risk areas such as restrooms or break rooms, and also check your filters and IAQ levels with environmental sensors. Lastly, IAQ sensors can help you understand the environmental conditions within the specific areas of your facilities. Values for humidity, temperature, carbon dioxide, light levels, and even the occupancy parameters can be displayed in charts and on a heat map. This will give you full visibility into your environmental quality for each space and how it relates to occupancy levels. Let me further add that the proper filter maintenance begins at the filter selection stage and continues through the filter installation, monitoring, maintenance, and replacement. In clean, controlled indoor environments such as the data centers or offices, it is typically best to change your filters 3 to 4 times a year based on a disciplined maintenance calendar. But in industrial facilities, depending on the nature of your business, often requires a filter change out every week. Plants with heavy smoke, soot, and other airborne contaminants require a massive filtration system. And with all the pollutants in the air, the filter can quickly become saturated. Try also to consider a finer filtration with finer grades such as high efficiency particulate air, commonly known as HEPA filter, and MERV rating 8 to 15. For the ventilation, let me further add that the ventilation has to improve your indoor air quality, as ventilation can control the indoor humidity and airborne particles, both of which either contribute to or act as health hazard. Actually, even ASHRAE approved the statement that ventilation and filtration provided by heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system can reduce the airborne concentration of SARS-CoV, or what we call the COVID-19, and thus the risk of transmission through the air. Next slide. Maintaining a good IAQ is not limited to reducing pollutants and contaminants in the air. It also requires keeping the facility at a comfortable temperature and managing humidity so employees in the workspace can work productively throughout the day. As I mentioned in the previous slides, the regular checks and following a maintenance calendar are essential, but we also have to ensure that we are using the right HVAC system in our facility. In most commercial buildings, we also run through the building management system, or what we call the BMS. These systems allow them to collect and report the information in one place, bringing in real-time monitoring to HVAC systems that will allow commercial building management to have powerful reports on the operations and the entire building. Next slide. Actually, there are many types of HVAC systems and each building is unique. But let's make everyone's goal to do the CPR in our respective facility. C, it is a clean air that is essential to each and every individual. P, to conduct the regular preventive maintenance in your HVAC system. Remember, preventive is better than cure. And R, to reduce the risk, as with proper or increased ventilation filtration, we can reduce the risk of getting sick. Actually, there are ASHRAE standards for ventilation, and most of us actually is following those standards. There are even additional guidelines provided by World Health Organization and lately from DOLE with regards to ventilation. For complementary assessment and to improve the indoor air quality and help prevent the coronavirus infections, the best starting point is an assessment by a qualified HVAC engineering firm like Santos Knight Frank. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Evelyn, for that great presentation. I like how you summarized it in your CPR, no? Clean, prevent, and reduce the risk. That's really a great way to summarize that. I have already started listing down a number of questions, and I'm looking forward to the open forum, but we'll have that shortly. We will have first our next speaker.
Yeah, sure.
Yep. So thank you again, Evelyn.
Okay,
and I will move on now quickly. Thank you. Thank you. I'll move on now to the introduction of our next speaker. He is Dustin Jefferson S. Onghanseng, co-founder and CEO of uHoo Limited. No? Now, Dustin is the co-founder and CEO of uHoo, a Singapore-based global environmental health platform. Prior to starting uHoo in 2014, Dustin worked as a senior consultant with Deloitte, where among his many successful strategic initiatives, he developed a corporate strategy that grew revenue by 20% annually for 2 consecutive years for Deloitte Southeast Asia, improved business processes of various Fortune 500 and large local companies that resulted on average a 10% reduction in workflow time and enhanced corporate governance and regulatory compliance. He advised life sciences and healthcare firms in the USA, Singapore, and Malaysia, and helped them raise eight-figure US dollar rounds for further growth. Dustin also worked as an analyst for BDO Raffles Consultants, where he was responsible for developing an overseas market entry strategy that resulted in the successful overseas expansion of a Taiwanese listed manufacturing firm into India. Born and raised in the Philippines, he finished his Bachelor of Computing in E-commerce at the National University of Singapore, or NUS, under full scholarship by the Singapore Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He completed an MBA specializing in strategy and entrepreneurship from the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, where he met his co-founder, Brian Lin, and started working on the idea for uHoo. Without further ado, allow me to pass on the virtual mic to Dustin. Dustin, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to your presentation.
All right, thanks, Chris, for the introduction. Good morning, everybody. Nice to meet everyone here. And let me share my screen now so we can start with the presentation. All right. All right. Good morning, everybody. My name is Dustin, and our company is called uHoo, and we position ourselves as your first step to clean air. And the reason why we say that is because in order for you to do something meaningful with the environment that you are staying in, you need to understand what's going on. It always starts with the data. And when you take action, you also need to know whether it was effective or not. So it always goes back to the data as well. And when we look at the world today, poor indoor air is actually the world's largest environmental hazard because not knowing what you breathe is going to make you sick. You're basically inhaling pollution, and that's going to weaken your immune system. It's going to weaken your body. And as we already know with the COVID-19 pandemic today, poor indoor air quality actually enhances the survival and the transmission of the virus. So it makes it even more important for us to understand and be able to manage our indoor environment. And the value that we really bring to our customers when they utilize our solution comes in four aspects. First would be health and productivity. We help their employees, we help occupants of a building, we help tenants of real estate developers understand how to manage and improve the health and productivity of all the occupants in the building. For companies in manufacturing facilities and real estate, we also help them attain sustainability certifications and comply with local regulations in terms of creating a safe and healthy working environment. We also help our clients generate new revenue, especially in the real estate field, and also in terms of offices, in terms of making their employees much more productive. And finally, using the data, you would also be able to automate certain aspects of your building that helps you reduce your energy use, resulting in savings, and also reducing your maintenance costs, because before issues occur, you would be able to prevent them. And what I would like to focus on in this webinar is more on the case studies so that it brings into light more context of the importance of monitoring and managing your indoor environment. So the first case study that we have, this is going to be a bread manufacturing firm. So yeah, they basically manufacture bread. They distribute it on a national level. And the issues that they were facing was that employees were getting sick inside their manufacturing facilities. And they need to find a way to comply with the local regulations as well. And when we analyze this case, we look at it from how the manufacturing facility works or the processes in it. We looked at it from the supplies coming in, the inventory being stored, the raw materials being stored to the point where they start baking the bread. They need the bread. They mix the flour and all that. And once the bread is out, it goes into the packaging station. So we tried to understand all of these processes and how each activities and each process within that whole chain affects the indoor environment and how that environment actually affects the people working there. So when we started looking at this case, they started utilizing the solution. They saw a lot of issues, and particularly when they were inside the area where they store, where they start to mix the flour with the different ingredients, dust levels are pretty high. And that's a given because when you start mixing, the flour would spread in the air. And that's the area where a lot of the employees would get sick. Because if you work there for 8 hours, you would keep on inhaling particles. And these particles would start to trigger asthma attacks, create allergies. Even if you don't have any of these allergies, you would develop these allergies because you're constantly exposed to these types of pollutants. Even though it's just flour, it still affects you because you inhale it, it gets stuck in your nostrils, it goes into your lungs as well. So these are the health aspects that we need to look into. So we were able to detect these, and what we advised the manufacturing facility to do was to install certain filters in the space, which can be automated by uHoo. So what they've done is the filters were there. When we detect higher dust particles, we switch it on automatically. It filters the dust particles. When it's already cleaned, we would be able to switch off the filters automatically as well. So this made air monitoring and management much more automated. So that's one aspect inside the breading or kneading station. And something that they didn't realize in their operations was that in the packaging area, the VOCs were extremely high. So they never really thought about what could be causing that. Because when you're packaging, the bread is there, it's done. All you needed to do was to wrap the bread. But then what they realized was that the ink that's printed on the packaging of used on the bread has a lot of chemicals. So if you think about it, if you're a customer of this company, you wouldn't want to take their bread because all their products actually are covered in chemicals because of the plastic packaging that they have. The bread that they're manufacturing is exposed to all of these. So that became a very big issue, which they never knew until they started measuring. So this also having this kind of data also helps you identify issues that you never knew you had. And once you know those, you would be able to address it and reduce any liability you have with your employees or liability with your market. Because this is something that you want to minimize as well. You want to manage your risk and minimize these risks. So what they did was they eventually changed their packaging supplier. They started working with a different one that is more eco-friendly, that is more sustainable. And once they changed their supplier, they saw that all those chemical levels in their factory just dropped inside the packaging station. So these are some of the things that they were able to improve on. And with this kind of data, when they're being audited on an annual basis by accredited companies that is required by the government, they were able to make sure that throughout the year, they maintain a safe level. And by maintaining that, when a random audit comes in, they're able to show that they're able to keep it at a safe level. So they don't need to scramble, they don't need to worry that they might fail the audit. In this case, they get themselves prepared for it. So this is one of the case studies that we have in the food manufacturing sector. Another one that I can share would be Schiphol Airport in the Netherlands. So this is not so much into manufacturing, but this is more of a large facility. So we are able to provide the name here because they're okay with giving out their name. So what they do is they own and manage the airport in the Netherlands, and they also own the 35 to 50 buildings and warehouses around the airport. And what they're trying to do is how do we utilize air quality as a means to create new businesses for basically to gain more rent revenue in essence and try to get more people to put their products inside their warehouses. And how do they utilize air quality data as a means to market themselves as a safe place to work in? So what they did was they deployed our solution across one entire building. It's an office building. And what they realized there was when they started measuring, their carbon dioxide levels were on average 1,500 ppm, which in Europe is way beyond the safety levels of 800 ppm. It is almost double. So it means that they're not complying with the green standards over there. So this created some cause of concern because they never knew this prior to measuring. So once they started understanding this, they were able to regulate their ventilation systems inside the building properly, and they were able to cut down this pollutant by 50% and kept it at approximately 800 ppm throughout the day, regardless of the people. So they are able to manage it properly. When there are more people inside the space, they have the data, they know how to pump up the ventilation system to bring down CO2 levels to 800 ppm instead of letting just go up and up because of people. So with this kind of information, they're also able to understand where people are inside the space. Because when you breathe, when you're inside a space, you would exhale carbon dioxide. And when more people congregate in an area, you would know that there are more people there, there's a crowd, then you might want to pump up the ventilation system in that area to reduce it down. So it became a much more automated system instead of something that is very reactive. And one thing that they really did with this is humidity, because in the Netherlands, you have 4 seasons. So humidity levels would change in every season. It can get really dry, it can get really humid. It's not like in the Philippines where humidity is often high in the 80%, approximately 70, 80, 90% throughout the year. Whereas in the Netherlands, it can get really dry. And when it's extremely dry, you would get sore throat, you would get dehydrated. If it's extremely humid, like in the Philippines, it's gonna create mold inside the space. So in order to minimize all of these problems, you need to make sure that humidity stays within 40 to 60%. And what they've done is they've fully integrated uHoo into their building management system. So the whole building is fully automated in the sense that if humidity goes down to 35%, 30% during the winter time or during the fall, we would automatically tell their BMS to automate the whole system inside the building to bring humidity back up to 40+% to make sure that it stays within the safety range. And when it gets to the summer, when it's approximately 70%, 70 plus 75%, we would bring it back down so that it can keep the whole building comfortable. Another issue that they faced there was we were able to detect a sudden drop in temperature of 5 degrees in one area in the building. So from an average temperature of 23 to 24 degrees, it suddenly dropped to 18 to 19 degrees for no apparent reason. So we sent an alert to the facilities team. They said they will check it, but they did not check it immediately. They scheduled one a few days later. But what happened was the very next day, the entire heating pipe inside the building exploded. So that became a cause of concern because that's an accident. You could have prevented that if you just went there and did the maintenance. So what happened was there was 3 weeks of no heating inside the building. People weren't able to work productively. So it killed productivity during those time, and they had to incur repair costs as well. And so what they did was they saw the value of utilizing the solution. So now they utilize this kind of data for managing their entire building, for facilities management. And they also utilize the data as a means to market the building. Because if you can market the building as healthy and safe, you can get a premium for your rent as well. So it became a business solution for them. So this is the case that we have in the Netherlands. And I can go back now to something that is more relevant, that is also on manufacturing. And this one is more on semiconductor. So they wanted to make sure that the clean rooms are maintained and the clean room status is always maintained as a clean room. You don't want to have pollution inside a clean room because you need to maintain it in that manner. So what they did was they utilized the uHoo. They left it inside the clean room, monitoring it continuously. And yes, it's always been a clean room throughout. But then there was one day wherein they saw a sudden increase in NO2 levels. And that increase in NO2 levels actually made them curious on what could be occurring inside the facility. And they were doing some tests. They were trying to understand what's causing it based on the activities inside. And what they realized was that they started investigating the HVAC system of the building. And they found out that one of the fan belts inside their HVAC was actually broken. And they were able to resolve this entire issue within just a few days. Because if you have the proper data, you would be able to identify issues, get your facilities team involved, and immediately address the issues. And they were able to reinstate the status of the clean room back to a clean room. So if they didn't have this kind of data, they won't be able to identify this kind of problem and address this problem. They would just have a clean room that is polluted continuously without this kind of information. So these are the case studies that we have. These are the kinds of value that we provide our clients. And when we look at the Philippines, DOLE just released a guideline effective March 3, just last week, that carbon dioxide levels should not exceed 1,000 ppm for any type of workplace, including offices, manufacturing facilities, and different types of facilities. So this is now starting to take shape in terms of the importance of monitoring and the importance of measuring continuously. And they even provided a guideline on how and where you should deploy your CO2 monitoring devices. So this is something that we are able to help companies in the Philippines as well in terms of complying with this new guideline from DOLE. So the whole premise of what we do is you can only manage what you measure. How we started the company back then was also based on this. So as Chris mentioned earlier, I met Brian while we were doing our MBA at HKUST. And while we were there, I have allergic rhinitis, he has asthma. And when we were inside the dormitories or inside the business school building, we would often get our allergies. And it's the same case for a number of the students there as well. But when we leave the building, we feel a lot better because we get to have fresh air, we have cleaner air. And when we complain to the facilities team there, they don't really do anything about it. So that became an issue. And that's when Brian and I decided, okay, we have to do something about this. We need to let the facilities team, the building, the school understand that there's something wrong. And the best way to do that is to provide data. So we started tinkering with the product, we started building it, and a year into our MBA program, both of us decided, okay, let's just drop our classes and start the company. And so we started the company, we built it up, we built the product, we built our own hardware, we built our own software. And what we have today is a whole suite of solutions of hardware, software, a dashboard, a mobile app, and APIs to integrate with your existing systems, because we want to help you monitor your environment so you know exactly how you can improve it. Because it's all about the health and well-being and safety of people in any environment. That's the premise on why we built the company. And to help address the COVID-19 pandemic through the technology that we have, we also developed the uHoo virus index. So this is patented. We are the only ones in the world who has this. And we are able to give you a real-time risk assessment of the coronavirus surviving and becoming airborne inside your facility. Because science has already proven that the coronavirus survives in a specific environment, and they become transmittable in the air within a specific environment. And since we measure all the parameters of this environment, we would be able to give you a risk assessment on whether the virus can survive if it's already there, or whether how efficient it is in being transmitted in the air if it's already there. So this gives you more context around the data. We would be able to help you lower your risk in terms of coronavirus transmission within your facilities. And these are some of the organizations worldwide who trust uHoo. These are the ones that utilize uHoo. In the Philippines, some of our clients include Menarco, Accenture, and Neo offices. And yeah, and we have a presence in 40 countries. So this brings my presentation to a close. We'd be happy to take any questions.
I guess I'm supposed to be, this is Dan, I guess I'm supposed to be reacting. Okay, thank you very much. I guess the first reaction is appreciation to Evelyn of Santos Knight Frank and Dustin of uHoo. Pretty impressive efforts that you put in there. And actually I see, I guess, synergy between your two products and services in the sense that, as Peter said, Dennis quoted, you can't measure with the data-driven troubleshooting and obviously the actions that come therein. So I can relate to the two of you because among the industries that you've serviced would be the semiconductor and electronics industries, which is obviously from SAPI. It's something near and dear to my heart. And I guess just to put it in perspective, for example, when Evelyn mentioned HEPA filters, that's something we use as a standard filter in semiconductors, and we try to eliminate 0.3 micron of particles using the HEPA filters. Obviously, there's a tighter filters in terms of ALPA, But then again, you also mentioned, both of you mentioned relative humidity and temperature. And just to kind of give you an idea, it's one thing to be outside, in the environmental air, but in a manufacturing facility, it's tighter. Evelyn mentioned 40 to 60 degrees of relative humidity, but in semiconductors, we need to go as low as 35%. And in terms of temperature, from minus 19 to minus 23 degrees centigrade. So the specifications are tight, but it doesn't change the fact that we need to measure the particles, whether it's the ink or the chemicals in a manufacturing facility, the CO2 in an airport, or in this particular case, the NO2 in a semiconductor industry. And so you measure it, you get an idea of, then you troubleshoot what's causing it, right? And then of course you get the services of, the engineering expertise of Santos Knight Frank. So it's really a supply chain, if you will, of understanding what an environment looks like from beyond what we can see, and also providing the technical appropriate services to resolve those situations. So really valuable insights. Thank you again. Thank you very much for Evelyn and Dustin. I think at this point, we can entertain the questions from the audience. Thank you.
Hi, Dan. Yeah, no, thank you so much for that reaction. And what I'll do, we actually have a third panelist with us that will be joining us. Allow me to just quickly introduce him, and maybe he can also show his video. Juni Biso is the design manager of Santos Knight Frank's technical services and engineering team. He has over 20 years of experience in the field of mechanical and electrical engineering, covering mechanical, electrical plumbing, fire protection, mechanical ventilation, and air conditioning systems. Junie, thank you also for joining us. I understand that you will be here with Evelyn and Dustin for our panel session, as well as Dan. Dan, I'm so pleased with the fact that you know all the different standards, at least when it comes to the semicon industry. So please do chime in as you feel fit. No. At this point, I'm not sure if we've received any questions in the chat, but we did receive some questions prior to this call. So maybe if you don't mind me starting to roll with those, and then if I would encourage anybody on the call, if you do have questions, feel free to post them in the chat box. And I think we even have the option to ask questions live, if I'm not mistaken. So if there is a raise hand functionality, please do raise your hand. If not, just mention in the chat you would like to speak live. I guess the first question, this is such a hot topic, especially in the context of our COVID situation. And I think it was Dustin that mentioned the recent passage of that DOLE, the Department of Labor and Employment DO. I'm wondering whether you can share, at a top level, any of you on this call, any key insights on that particular regulation. Is it reasonable? Is it in standard? Does it make sense in the context of COVID? And how does that change potentially, maybe the systems, the IAQ related systems we put in place in our various buildings and operations? What sort of big changes can be expected, if at all, because of that order? Maybe Evelyn, Evelyn, why don't you kick it off, and June, feel free to chime in after that. Maybe Dustin can.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Chris. Actually, the standards, and we are following the American the ASHRAE, that we have the the ASHRAE standards for indoor air quality. Um, with the series of 2019. So globally, we are following that. And given the new dollar requirement, it states in the Department Order 224 that proper ventilation should be in place. So that's the main and the summary of the guidelines that are required by Department of Labor at this point. For each and every um, business, we have to reinspect the ventilation of our building. So probably Junie can add on our on the question, Chris?
Yes, Miss Evelyn. Actually, 5 days ago, the World Health Organization releases a new guideline dated, I think, March 5, 2021. So let me check the title of the.
Sorry, I think you've gone muted, June.
Yeah,
Junie.
yes.
All right.
My one of my colleagues called me and informed me of this new guidelines. So the guideline state title is this one: Roadmap to improve and ensure good indoor ventilation in context of COVID-19. So this is related the ventilation requirement of the system related to COVID-19. For further reading, it is available on their website. So we can just browse it. It is a 38 pages document that is free to download. To discuss this one, maybe we can maybe some of us already know this, but I can discuss it fully. Uh, Maybe in terms of how we can perform the requirements written on the guidelines. So since this is a new regulation, I have a copy of that one. So the regulation states in this way. This should be the steps. In consultation with HVAC professional, assess the opportunity to increase ventilation. So what does this mean? This means that maybe our ventilation system is only operating at 50% by now. So there is an opportunity to increase the operation to full capacity, say 100%. Or if you have spare ventilation fans that are provided as standby, so hope that it can be operated in parallel simultaneously, so we can utilize that one to increase the required ventilation. Another thing is to disable demand control ventilation. So most modern ventilation system are automated. So they use this demand control to limit or to reduce airflow based on temperature or occupancy. Oh, this is the one of the requirements. Second one, if the ventilation cannot be increased mechanically, the World Health Organization consider maximizing ventilation using natural ventilation. So what does this mean? This means opening windows. But I think for air conditioned space, there are no windows, so we cannot adapt this one. Just for those who uses windows. Uh, the third one, if the system does not allow increasing the ventilation up to the required recommended minimum, so the the requirement should be to consider reducing the maximum room occupancy just to meet the liters per second per person. I think some industries are using this one. Also, this also comply to the health protocol mandated on social distancing. So we are not still retrofitting the existing system. The third one, if if no other strategy can be adapted, consider using a standalone filtration system using MERB 14 or F8 filters. This is the suggestion of the WHO without retrofitting. Just need a assessment of the system. Based on this requirement, the minimum required ventilation rate is 10 liters per second per person. Or if you are inclined on the English language, on the English system, it is 21 CFM per person. That is the latest requirement from WHO.
Thank you so much, Junie, for enlightening us on that latest from WHO. And I hope that our latest Dole order is aligned with that in one way or another. No, but maybe Dustin, I'd like to get your thought as a technology solution provider on indoor air quality as well. Your thoughts on these latest standards, so to speak, in relation to COVID, and I guess how I based on your experience, what you're seeing on the ground here. I mean, are you seeing a lot of difficulty in terms of complying with these new standards? Does your technology help in that regard? And I guess just to generally comment about these emerging standards to fight COVID.
In our perspective, these emerging standards, it's more of a long time coming. These should have been there way back, because these are the things that determine whether a building is actually healthy or not. So if we look at the spread of the coronavirus as a case for having these standards, it's actually too late, because buildings were built not on these standards. So if you want to improve the buildings today, you have to retrofit it with so many things to be able to comply with these standards. But if at the construction phase you already adhere to these and you have the proper data to monitor and manage the building, then the number of the spread within a building would be reduced. If I can give an example, if we look at, let's say, Benarco here in the Philippines, they're considered the healthiest building in Southeast Asia, and they're the only ones with the LEED Gold and the Well Gold standard. So that looks at both health and well-being and energy. And when you look at when they had a coronavirus case inside the building, it was just one person. It did not spread, because they have the proper systems to be able to minimize that kind of spread, the proper ventilation systems. They didn't need windows. Their air exchange was working properly. Their filters were working properly, and they're able to keep the humidity and temperature at a specific level that is not conducive for the virus to survive. So when they tested, when they had our solution inside their building, they can see that their virus index was always good throughout. So these are the kinds of standards we need to have way before even the pandemic started. It's more of the pandemic coming in that these standards are starting to take off, because now people are reacting to it. Prior to that, it's being taken for granted. So this is how we perceive it, because the only way to really manage a building is to be able to measure it first, so that you can take the proper action.
Oh,
Yeah.
very, very good insight there. Actually, it does kind of lead to another question that I've received about, we know that, well, knock on wood, COVID is a temporary thing, right? Sooner or later, we'll be able to get over that. But do you see that the standards around indoor air quality being established today in reaction to the pandemic are things that are going to stay with us for a long time? And I guess, moving forward, what else is there to expect in terms of new standards in terms of IAQ, or insofar as IAQ is concerned?
Uh,
Anybody can feel free to go ahead, Dustin. Yeah.
yeah. So when we look at standards to IAQ, it's been there as a standard, as a guideline that don't really require people to follow. So we have like lead. It's focused on energy. They have a few parameters on IAQ, but it's not like they don't put it as a core focus. But when we look at the well standard, that one is really focused on health and well-being, and there's a very big focus on indoor environment, and they're really pushing for it. The same with Fitwell, the same with Reset. So these are international standards that are really pushing for it, and it takes a lot of education and campaigning for people to realize that this is important. And if we look at it, if we look at the industry, it's always buildings looking at energy savings. It's about green buildings. But what happened with COVID-19 is it accelerated the push for healthy buildings. Because if you have a healthy building, it's already green. But now you're focused on the health of people inside, not just energy, which how buildings should be. Because it's built for the people. It's not built to just be green or efficient.
No, thank you, Dustin. Yeah, you're right. It's a changing mindset on
Mm.
what a green building is, which should include human health. Evelyn, June, did you want to just chime in on that? Emerging trends on regulation standards when it comes to IAQ.
Yeah, totally agree with Dustin. there are really international standards, and those standards are really in place. So the American standards that I mentioned earlier, it's really been there. So it's a matter of how we follow the local guidelines that are imposing right now. We are pushing for the Dolly is pushing to provide a good ventilation for each and every building. So we just have to follow the local guidelines right now.
So let me just quickly ask. Okay, so having a standard is one thing. What's compliance like on the ground these days, insofar as the at least existing standards are concerned? I mean, do you find compliance quite strong in the Philippines? I have my doubts, but I would love to hear it straight from you, who are closer to the ground.
Yeah, with compliance, even with Santos Knight Frank, right now, we are really into following the guidelines given by the DOH and the Department of Health and the DOLE right now that we are really just learned from a few days ago. So we are in place for following those guidelines, and each and every one were cascaded and followed by those we're into it for the guidelines that we have to follow. Yep.
Uh, I guess my question is more in relation to existing or prospective
Uh-huh.
customers, and what's the compliance rate like, right? And I guess by extension, the reason I ask is, the cost to compliance, I'm sure, is another thing that we would like
Yeah.
to consider, and
Mhm.
so maybe you would like to comment on that. I have no
Yeah.
doubt that Santos Knight
Yeah,
Frank
sure.
will follow.
Okay,
I-
okay. But right now with compliance with the manufacturing facilities, um, right now we have having problems uh with even with the moisture, even with the smelly air inside the building. No, so giving the following those rules that these manufacturing facilities have these standards as well. um, we have just to propose the increasing ventilation and uh, air filtration that they have to comply, just to make those requirements to be at least. So we just have to comply with the increased ventilation and air filtration.
Thanks, Evelyn.
Yeah,
Junie, would you like to
yeah.
add to that?
Yeah, yes, Chris. Based on my experience, uh, in the Philippines, mostly they are not complying on even though the they think that the regulation is very expensive. That's why that is the very reason for that one. So other companies, those multinational companies, are complying, but the local ones, the small ones, are not. That is my observation.
No, thank you. And that oftentimes when it comes to environmental regulation compliance, we know if the cost to comply is quite high, the likelihood of compliance is going to probably be low, especially if we know that enforcement is not necessarily strong, right? Dustin, I see you smiling since the start of my question, so I'd love to hear from you, your experience.
Well, the way we view it is because earlier, Junie mentioned that it's about the cost of compliance. But I think we have to look at it from the value of complying. Though there's a reason why the laws are there. It's to make sure that you achieve a certain standard. So if you look at, let's say, the value of or the expenses that you incur, companies spend $3 in utilities per square foot. They spend $30 in rent per square foot, but they spend $300 in payroll per square foot. So if you really want to achieve a return, you can spend a few dollars, $1, $2 only, just to improve your environment and get a $300 return in terms of productivity, in terms of reduction in sick leave, in terms of enhancement in how people work. So it has to be viewed from that angle. But if you're viewing it from the cost of compliance, that's the cost today, but you're not seeing what you're getting when you invest in it in the long term. So it has to be more of a strategic mindset than just looking at it from, okay, it's going to cost this today or for the next month, but it has to be from a long-term mindset.
Well, thank you so much, Dustin. I would fully agree with you. I guess just from the perspective though of maybe the smaller companies that are having difficulty just surviving these days, it becomes a sort of how would you try to convince them that it is still worth investing in today, despite that cost that they would have to incur to be able to make it happen.
I guess it's about keeping your business open, because if you can keep it safe, you can get people in, you can continue to run the business. But if you
No,
have
yeah.
COVID cases inside, then you're basically closed, right?
No, fully agree. No, thank you for that. I have heard here and there some issues around this new dole, order, and just it's just another additional cost that comes to mind. I guess not understanding the rationale behind it, right, or the value proposition that you just discussed, right, will make people think that way. We need to change those minds to keep our, to be able to get over this pandemic sooner rather than later. I'd like to call on my co-chair, Dan. I mean, you've been listening to the conversation. I'm sure some of thoughts have come to mind. Please feel free to chime in.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, yeah, we've heard a lot about conversations for non-electronics, but I think the points are well taken and strikes home when it comes to the electronics industry. As you know, we were shut down for a couple of months, and we were able to ramp up to 30%, 50%, 100%. But with in the midst of COVID, the threat is always there. We need to make sure that our environment measures clean, and we're given a heads up if there are disturbances in whether it's temperature, relative humidity, or contaminants there. In fact, I just recalled that there is another alert for Taal volcano, and as you know, we started 2020 with a bang, and that is the Taal volcano bang. And part of what happened at that time is the existing filtration system wasn't adequate, and so we actually had to, with the ashfall, we had to introduce some modifications to our filtration system to address that. But so that's internal to the fab, but outside is even more important. As you know, it's one thing to be able to see the ashfall as it fish ponds or swimming pools, but then again, what is the content of that air around us? So again, from our industry, the sodium content of that air is fatal to our devices. So if it's fatal to devices, what will that do to the people, right? So in fact, we were actually talking to Undersecretary Rene Solidum if there's a way to have, at least in strategic locations, monitors to kind of check what the air quality is. 1,000 ppm of CO2 outside, good luck. But then again, it makes sense to have devices like uHoo and services like Santos Frank to be able to help. Well, for uHoo to have monitor the air quality inside and outside, but for Santos Knight and Frank to be able to help the companies to address this either one-off or common concerns that beset our manufacturing environment. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thanks so much for that, Dan. There was a quick question. There is one question here. Maybe somebody can, if you would be willing, is it possible to share with the participants ventilation standards and corresponding references? Would you be willing, our speakers, to maybe share some of that with us so we can circulate to our members?
Yes, Chris. Yeah, yes, Chris. Actually, those standards are available on the net. So, but I can provide if they wanted. Which one? Which one? Would they do they have specific
I think your WHO one would be a start, but I guess I think I think a lot on the call also are not technical or may not even be handling this, but would like to pass it on to their technical teams. And so any top level standards to make sure that we're meeting the indoor air quality not just for COVID, but I guess just for healthy living, as Dustin was talking about. If you have a few of those references, I think our members would appreciate that. Even if they're just links to websites, that would be useful.
Yes, Chris, I'll send the one of these links. Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So, we were talking about the need to retrofit as these standards evolve. I mean, if you were to look at the industrial complexes that exist in the country today, the residential buildings, are we talking about major retrofitting that would be needed? And, I mean, what is the cost efficient way to be able to retrofit to meet these evolving or emerging standards as we were discussing earlier? Anybody, feel free to chime in on that.
Yes, Chris, Junie. Actually, the requirement of WHO is not really a retrofit. This is an assessment. So you have first to assess the system if it is capable of of the guidelines they are provided. This does not really mean that you have to increase your ventilation, install another ventilation system. This is not the context of the WHO.
Yes, no, thank you, Junie. Dustin, I think you did kind of allude to it earlier, and I just wonder whether, you know, um, you can comment on that. I imagine that uh, when you hear retrofit and just cost, it's what how bad really is it? I mean, I'm sure new buildings will comply, but the ones that were built before, how difficult would it to get them up to a standard that we
Uh,
would
yeah, I
prefer?
guess we'll have to split it into two aspects. So we can view it from a new building and from an old building. So if we look at it from a new building, they still encounter a lot of issues because when they run their building management system or their HVAC, it's based on what was like the preset prior to occupancy. So once you have occupancy, your entire environment completely changes. When you have activities, your environment changes. So if you don't measure this, you cannot really manage your building systems properly. And that's what a lot of our clients realize. They always say, we have a new building, we have sensors inside the building, but their sensors are placed inside the AHU. So if it's inside the AHU, it's not reflective of what people feel at the breathing zone. So that's the reason why people would still complain. They would still feel sick because you're not measuring where people are, you're measuring what's inside the ducting, which is not really as relevant when we talk about health. It's more about energy if it's inside the ducting. So we have to view it from that aspect. So when we deploy with our clients who have new buildings, they don't really incur any retrofitting costs. They utilize our solution. They learn how to manage their buildings much more efficiently. So efficiently means comes in two forms. It's enhancing the health and well-being. It reduces the complaints. And at the same time, they're also able to achieve some form of energy savings because they understand that they don't need to pump the ventilation that much. They don't need to pump the air conditioner that much. They base it on the data and react based on it. Then if we look at, let's say, the older buildings, these are much more difficult to manage, but there are different ways to address it. So if we look at, because we have to separate it as well from Asia, Europe, and the US. In Europe and the US, they have natural ventilation. And well, mainly in Europe, they have natural ventilation in the buildings. In Asia and the US, there's not a lot of natural ventilation because it's fully air conditioned. So it's all about finding out what the problem is and then addressing it. If the problem would be, let's say, temperature and humidity, that's mainly adjusting the air conditioning systems. If the problem would be, let's say, in particle pollution and gases, that would be, if the building cannot filter it, then you would need to have standalone purifiers. So this becomes an additional cost, but it's not a retrofit of the building. But if it becomes an issue of carbon dioxide, which we've seen in a number of our clients, even in BGC, They just need to manage their buildings properly. And some of them, the older buildings in BGC, they have no choice but to retrofit something into it because they don't have the systems to actually fix it. Yeah. So the first step is always knowing what your problem is. So we don't want to just jump into, okay, let's propose a solution without knowing the problem. We need to know the problem, then we propose a solution and continuously understand how effective the solution is. So that's the usual process that we do.
Perfect. No, thank you.
Chris, may
Thanks
I
for
add
that answer.
that
Yes, please, Dan.
the cost can be minimal to huge, and like Dustin said, it just depends on, well, it depends on a lot of parameters: the age of the building, the existing regulations. But yes, you do have to baseline because even, for example, even if your airflows as designed were okay, but then again, over time, as you put in new equipment, laying them out and everything, then you could be obstructing the designed airflow, right? And then if your technology requirements have changed also, like for example, if I may draw back on an electronics company operation, if you all of a sudden you've decided to go to a sub-micron, nanomicron technology, you may even have to raise the floor to enhance the turnover of the air. So there's just a lot of parameters. But by the way, when I say micron, just to give people an idea, it's 1/1,000th of a micron. And just another point of reference, it's about a human hair is about 70 microns thick. But if you're talking about my hair, it's zero, right? So there's a lot of parameters, like I said. But Dustin is right. You just have to do a baseline survey of where you're at today, measure what your, the parameters that you're interested in, whether it's temperature, humidity, or airflow, and then come up with an expert design service to, such as Santos Knight and Frank, so that you can come up with a proper intervention and redesign if needed. Thanks.
Oh, great input there, Dan. Thank you so much. Evelyn, did you want to add something?
Yeah, Chris. Actually, with given the statements coming from Dustin, Dan, and Junie, um, those are all included from what I have been thinking. So just adding to a evaluation on giving the right air for the building, we just have to improve the air ventilation in the building. That's very important. And those occupancy and the type of the HVAC that they are using in the building. So that is one of they have to check as well.
Wonderful.
Yep.
No, thank you. Thanks for that addition, Evelyn. Um, I think those were all the questions that came up on my list. Anybody from the floor would like to raise their hand? If not, we're gonna go through one last round of our panelists, maybe coming leaving with their closing remarks each. But any raised hands? Oh, sorry, Q and A's. My bad, I didn't see that. Maybe we can go through these quickly. Dole's announcement mentioned 90% of business surveyed were compliant. This seems to paint a rosier picture than described by the speakers. Any thoughts on this? Anybody feel free to take that on. So they're talking about high compliance, right? But it does, at least based on your experience, it may not be as high as 90%. Any thoughts on, you know, is there something wrong with Dole's survey? Does it look about right? Do you think that they may not have the capacity to monitor at the level that they need to check whether certain buildings or structures are meeting standard?
Well, actually, Evelyn here, Chris.
Yes, Evelyn.
Actually, yeah. Actually, Dole is mandating and instructing each and every business that um, even the local the LGUs should have um, a monthly inspection regarding the compliance of this DOLE new department order. So I think each and every business should comply on that, because they have to follow a checklist. They submitted a checklist, that a simple checklist, that a minimum requirement given by DOLE. So we don't have any choice but to follow, but to comply.
No, that's clear. That's
Yeah.
clear. All right. I'll move on to the next question here. May I ask, what is the best filter system aside from MERV system to manage indoor air quality? And how will we treat outdoor air to minimize the percentage of COVID virus? Anyone wish to answer that?
Yes, Chris. Yes, Chris.
Yes, Junie.
Based on the WHO suggestion, MERV 14 is the required filter class, or F8. Most air conditioning system that are being installed now are using the MERV 4 or 5. So WHO is suggesting using MERV 14.
Thank you, Junie. Okay, we have one last question, and then we'll probably have to close up this open forum. While engineering solutions can be implemented to increase airflow or to reduce occupancy to ensure compliance, what are your thoughts about having a continuous monitoring system to measure CO2 levels, to detect changing conditions and adjust accordingly to increase your confidence on the safety of your building or workspace? Dustin, would you like to quickly touch on that?
Yeah, sure. So, when we look at continuous monitoring, CO2 is only one aspect of it. It's often used as a proxy for fresh air because it's a proxy for ventilation. But if we really want to increase the confidence, you need to understand the different parameters because CO2 is only one aspect. Temperature and humidity affects the survival rate of viruses, regardless if it's coronavirus or a different type of virus, a flu virus, or other pathogens. So you need to stay within a specific temperature and humidity to reduce that risk. If we look at allergies, people getting allergies, it can be in the form of particles, different types of gases. So all of these need to be looked at and managed. CO2 is like it's like the easily accepted way of addressing ventilation. So it always comes to mind that, okay, let's just do CO2 without really understanding what air quality is. That's why a lot of the industry today, even standards, they just approximate air quality to CO2, when in fact that shouldn't be the case.
Right. But your sensors are continuously monitoring the various parameters, correct?
Yes, so
It's
we
a
measure,
continuous monitoring. It's
yeah,
not like a one point in time.
no,
Yeah.
no, it's minute by minute. You see all the trends, and we
Yeah.
measure 9 parameters or 13 parameters depending on which hardware you use.
Wonderful. All right. That question was the last one that's coming up on mine, on my screen. So, with that, maybe very briefly, 20, 30 seconds each, any parting words of wisdom from each of you? And, in the spirit of International Women's Day, I'll kick it off with Evelyn.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Um, Thank you for having me, and so glad to be with all the panels here. And my parting words: let's do the CPR. Clean, prevent, and reduce the risk. That's it.
Thank you so much, Evelyn.
Yeah.
CPR. I'm going to remember that from now on.
Okay.
Junie, any parting words?
Yeah, yes, based on the latest directive from WHO, I would be sharing the link, or I'll download the file and give it to someone there to share the file. So that everyone should understand the context of it. Maybe someone misinterpreted my explanation, but the context is written on that very guidelines. So I'll send it. Thank you very much for attending.
Thank you so much, Junie. Dustin?
Yeah, I guess the parting words would be let's focus on creating healthy and safe spaces for people because they're the people who work in our company. We need to be responsible and taking care of them.
Perfect. No, great way to end. Green is just more than just physically being green. It's also at the end of the day about the people that are using those facilities. That's what makes a green building and their health. So thank you for that, Dustin. Dan, my co-chair.
Okay. Well, Junie and Evelyn and Dustin are all right. We need to baseline our facility, our environment, and make sure that we're compliant. But beyond that, and this is dramatized by the pandemic, right? We just shouldn't be focused on meeting and complying, but we should be prepared to upgrade our facilities to face the next challenge, whatever they might be. So let's just be prepared for the next challenges and make sure that we may even over-design to provide additional flexibility, but it's better to be stringent than relaxed as we handle this environmental condition. So again, thanks to Dustin, Evelyn, and Julie, and my partner in crime again here, Chris. Thank you.
Dan, no, thank you so much. And for me, not being an expert on all of this, I've learned so much today. But just leaving with CPR, I feel like I've already left with a whole wealth of knowledge. And it's, I guess, there are always silver linings in crisis, and I guess at least insofar as indoor air quality is concerned, it is one of those silver linings, because now people understand that it is an important thing to worry about in the places that we work or even the places that we live. So I appreciate all our experts that have joined us today. Thank you. And at this point, I would like to invite our executive director, Eb Hinchcliffe, for his closing remarks. Thanks, Eb, for joining. I know we're competing events right now.
Thank you, Chris, and great to see everybody. Thank you of course, to Santos Knight Frank, our corporate partner, close friend, the board member, Rick Santos, and the whole team at Santos Knight Frank. And it's just great to partner with them once again for this great meeting. I spent most of my career in manufacturing, and it was, I never dreamed it would be talking about green manufacturing. So today was really enlightening for the old timer like me, that to think that how much progress we've made in the manufacturing field and how much more we got to go. But it is really great information today, and really appreciate the information sharing. I am calling in from Tagaytay. If you want an update, I haven't felt any of the tremors. We're now on alert number 2 up here. They raised it from 1 to 2, but other than having poor internet and heavy rain outside, I'm doing okay up here. Hopefully the volcano stay quiet for a while longer. But again, thank you everybody. A big thanks to Santos Knight Frank. Thanks to for this great meeting today. And if there's anything that I can do or the chamber can do to support you, you know where to find us. We really appreciate it. Keep in touch and stay safe. Thanks everybody. Have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.